Today, Ferguson media blackout, copyright industry madness, and more crackdown on information. Your host is Rick Falkvinger, and this is Liberties Report.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Good evening and welcome to Liberties Report Week 34. Last week we spoke about Ferguson, Missouri in the USA, just by the bank of the Mississippi River, and how police troops had attacked media crews there, specifically tear-gassed an Al Jazeera television crew. There is a war going on over knowledge here, just as when the printing press arrived. You know, in the 1500s, the Catholic Church had, up until then, had a monopoly on culture and knowledge. They were able to tell people what was true and what was not. When the printing press arrived, that changed pretty much overnight. And what happened with the Catholic Church was that they went after this new technology. They went after the printing press. They went after those who used the printing press. They went after the companies who wanted to profit from the printing press. They went after everybody involved in the dissemination of ideas that were not under the control of the Catholic Church. So think about that. Who controls knowledge and culture today? The Catholic Church eventually escalated the penalties for using a printing press to the death penalty in France on January 13, 1535. And if you go to the law books from this time, yes, they're still there, yes, they're still in archives, and look at the justification for the death penalty for using a printing press, you'll find that it was to prevent the dissemination of dangerous ideas. I think we can relate to that. So who controls knowledge and culture today? Frankly, anybody who aspires on our minds. Governments today are trying to conceal their actions. They're trying to poison the news well or dry it out entirely. Let's look at Ferguson again. Amnesty International has dispatched a team to Ferguson, Missouri, USA. They said this was the first time they had to dispatch observers to the United States. Amnesty was confined to a so-called First Amendment area. The First Amendment being the freedom of speech clause in the United States. So you had a cordoned off area where freedom of speech was supposed to apply, rather than being in the constitution of the country itself, which would be the more civilized route to go. Fittingly enough, somebody had put up a sign just below this First Amendment area sign saying, the First Amendment is not an area. This area was also for media, for old media, anybody who wanted to report on what was going on there. And when it didn't suit the power holders any longer, they were shooed off. They weren't even allowed to stay in the cordoned off area. This is a battle for control of what we know, of what we may know, of what we may not know. And as a tweet fittingly said, you know, when you're ejecting Amnesty International, as the Ferguson law enforcement was, you may actually be the bad guy. However, governments are not the only ones trying to constrict the supply of knowledge and culture, the supply of what we know, the supply of what we can observe. One just as strong player in this field is the copyright industry, which is built on the fundamental concept of restricting knowledge and culture and profiting from its restriction, profiting from its scarcity, profiting from its unavailability. And they're taking things to increasingly extreme and perverse positions. TechDirt has a story about how the copyright industry is now trying to outlaw knowing and memorizing things. Yes, you heard that right. They're trying to actually make it illegal to remember things that go against their business interest. And here's this quote from Michigan State University, which they have on a test. The examination and the items contained therein are protected by copyright law. No part of this examination may be copied or reproduced in part or in whole, by any means whatsoever, including memorization, note-taking, or electronic transmission. Any means whatsoever, including memorization. So get that. Studying for a test at a university is now infringement of the copyright monopoly, limiting what knowledge and culture we are allowed to know, remember, share, and use. Wow. There's a concept here of selective enforcement. Selective enforcement. We're each breaking this bizarre copyright monopoly on a daily basis, dozens of times every day, as we share things that are interesting. And that's also, by the way, why the copyright monopoly will not survive. It tries to prevent people from sharing interesting things. But whenever somebody cracks down on somebody sharing, they're sued for millions of euros, dollars, name your currency, essentially. And here's a law that's so selectively applied to when somebody is inconveniencing somebody else, and that everybody's breaking dozens of times on a daily basis, cannot survive. Everybody's guilty, and it becomes a matter of who's inconveniencing the power holders. This becomes a means of oppression, not of justice. And let's go back to governments again to see how this fits into the big picture. There was a video released this week of the rather gruesome beheading of a reporter named James Foley. And people reacted in various ways to this video with a beheading. The UK police, Scotland Yard and the Metropolitan Police had the most bizarre reaction that it was illegal to watch the video. To watch the video. Now, I don't want to see this video, but that doesn't mean police get to tell me what's illegal to see and what is not illegal to see. When pressed on the matter, asking exactly what law makes it illegal to watch this report, this video, they said, well, this is our interpretation of the law. And pressed again on the matter, say, your interpretation of what law? They were, quote, unable to say, end quote. You see what's going on here? Again, governments are trying to restrict the news flow, restrict the media. And it's perverse, ironic, and obscene that they're using an execution of a reporter as an excuse to crack down on free reporting, isn't it? Meanwhile, by the way, the Islamic State is funded by Saudi Arabia, who, this month alone, have beheaded 19 people, according to Human Rights Watch, 8 of which were non-violent offenders, including for sorcery, which, according to sources, typically means that they had an epileptic seizure. Have you seen any of this? No. Have you seen the James Foley video being discussed everywhere? Yes. Why have you not seen the 19 executions in Saudi Arabia? Because Saudi Arabia is an ally of the Western world and they supply oil for US dollars. The news world today is extremely biased by political interests. The old media news have very little correlation to objective fact, and it took me years, if not decades, to realize this. Political interests are trying to contain constrict and restrict what you know, what we know, what we're allowed to know and share with each other. This is nothing new. This has been going on for 500 years, but it's up to us to put an end to it, and the internet gives us that very ability. I'm Rick Falkvinge, and this is Liberties Report. Do visit our sponsor, Private Internet Access. Good night.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Liberties Report is produced using exclusively free software.